up here.
All of my music choices were super good. But this was the gayest, so thank you for that, for choosing that one. Yeah, so it was really tough picking something to read because Angie has gone around saying this about me, and so I really wanted to read something that's uncomfortably sexy, but since we're being filmed, hi Mom, I can't do that. So I guess all you really, I'm going to read a scene from my novel, and I guess the only thing you really need to know is that the main character, Gil, he lives with his aunt and uncle, with his brother, and he's sort of been hanging out with this guy who works at a radio station, plays country music, and he's about 20 years older than Gil. And this is like their first night out together. Also, there's like a little chunk missing from this scene for the sake of time. But you guys are smart, you'll figure it out, something about an ID, because he's underage. Okay. Gil followed the radio host to a bar down the street, a building in the middle of the block with no windows that he hadn't noticed before, with a tiny sign over the door that you would only catch if you knew to look for it. It said Trinkles. It was dark inside, with a few Christmas lights hanging above the bar, and the music was loud, thumping throughout the building, the bar's pulse. How hadn't he felt it on the street outside? The place wasn't very wide, like a thin slice of cake, but it seemed to never end, it went so far back. The only women in the place were men in dresses wearing pounds of makeup. Alan guided Gil through the crowd of curious men, old men and young men, men in dresses, all following him with their eyes, never breaking their focus, staring, looking, and he ordered 2 rum and diets. You like that, right? Gil nodded, looking around at everything. The man with a wig that looked like a beehive on his head, the man who must have been 7 feet tall and was wearing a jean jacket intended for a girl almost half his size, his mouth slightly open as he took it all in. I can't believe you've never been, Alan said. Don't you just love it? How could he have missed it, all of these weeks, going to the radio station and spending time with Alan? How could he not know all of the attention? Did Alan want him to? Was this his way of saying it? Had he been saying it all along? Gil sipped the drink that had been placed in his hand. It burned his throat and he wanted to spit it out. This caused him to choke and cough. Too strong, kid? He laughed. Guess they don't teach you how to drink in homeroom. I'm sorry, Gil said through another cough. I didn't mean to lie. Don't worry about it. We've all been there. Boys will do much worse for much less. You'll see. His voice was somehow different. He was different. As if walking through the door triggers a new you, the real you. This was Alan Cantor. Gil wanted to learn everything about Alan and the life that he lived, this one he had kept secret until now. He was a celebrity, the radio man. Everyone knew him and waved to him, and while Gil was at his side, everyone wanted to know him too. Then the lights dimmed and a voice came from all of the speakers. The show's about to start, bitches. Make your way to the stage. The MC entered the center of the floor. The baritone voice that had been calling everyone to gather over the speakers did not match the leather bodysuit, knee-high boots, and ponytail extension he was wearing. She was wearing. Misha Mark was her name. But you can call me M&M, she said, like the candy, only sweeter, an emphasis on the The crowd hooted and hollered after almost everything M&M said, and when they didn't, she held the microphone away from her, the other hand on her hip, and pointed it toward the crowd with a pout on her face, heels inverted, hips sticking out to the side. The crowd roared and even Gil clapped. A man dressed like a pregnant bride performed a medley of Madonna's greatest hits. As she danced around, people offered her dollar bills, threw them on the floor, put them in her fake cleavage. When Like a Virgin came on, she yanked a pillow out from her white dress, and dollar bills came spilling out all over the floor. A short boy with no shirt came running behind her and started picking up the cash. He swatted away the hands of the people in the audience who tried to get some for themselves. That's her boyfriend, Alan said, but he acts like her stage mom. Gil wanted to ask more. He wanted to know what it was like between 2 men, what it was like between 2 men when one dressed up like a girl. but he had already embarrassed himself enough with the fake ID and the drink, and he didn't want Alan to change his mind, send him home. So he just watched the show and tried not to look like every fiber of him was coming into place. It was like watching a home video after you've lost all of your memories. You recognize it, you think it's you, it should be you. Why isn't it you? But somehow it's not. Somehow this is the first time. Every time someone new walked on the floor, Alan got real close to Gil and told him who they were over the music, whispering in screams. His lips were so close to Gil's ear that if he moved even slightly, Alan would be kissing him on the cheek. This fact made him aware of his entire body. "That's LaDonna," Alan whispered to Gil when an overweight drag queen came on the floor. The colors on her face were bright and thick, almost like a clown. He's so ugly, the only time people will let him kiss them is when he's wearing makeup. Every so often, LaDonna would reach out into the surrounding crowd and grab someone's face, pull them in, and plant a sloppy kiss on their mouth. Her victims were covered in purple lipstick smeared across their face and walked around the rest of the night pointing to their mouth and saying, "Can you believe it? Can you believe it?" Gil wanted to be marked. He wanted some way for people to know he was one of them. He stepped a little forward and waited for LaDonna to pull him in, but she never did. Everyone sang along when songs they knew played from the speakers in the bar, dancing, filling it with so much sound that you could almost feel it as you moved, like pushing through invisible music jello. People said hello to Alan when they passed. They kissed cheeks, twisted nipples, and spanked butts, all in jest and camaraderie, for show, for fun, because they were friends. This is how we shake hands. This is how we say hello. Alan told Gil their names and how he knew them. Oh, how Gil wanted to know them. The drag queen that performed a Cher song, dressed in a tacky ancient Egyptian costume, walked right off the floor as the song was still playing when he saw Alan. They embraced, and he quickly turned to Gil, introducing them. Her name was Clementine. The three of them walked over to the bar to get another drink. "Holding an empty glass is like going to the prom without a date," she said to Gil as they walked. "Go stand next to an old man when you have a few sips left and wait for him to offer you more. Young people should never buy their own drinks." Clementine also knew everyone in the bar. As the pair walked through the crowd, Gil following behind, people waved and tried to stop them. They were like a float in a parade. "During the day," Clementine said at the bar, "I work at a law office down the street. His name was Clement and he was a legal aid. He wore a suit and combed his hair, but at night he put on gowns and wigs and performed at bars all over western Pennsylvania. Sometimes I drive for an hour on the turnpike to little hick towns and perform at dive bars. I tell them I'm Miss Whatever and they pay me like $200 to host or close a show." And then she said, "If you think the queens in this bar are bad, honey, you should see the Hicktown queens. They use markers for makeup." "I think they're pretty good," Gil said. He sipped his drink and it burned as it went down. His head started to feel light. "Oh, you should have told me. Well, you have your drag queens, the impersonators of all your divas, like..." "This is Gil's first time," Alan told his friend. "Oh, you should have told me. Well, you have drag queens, the impersonators of all your divas, like Babs and Judy. And then there's originals like me." He framed his silhouette with his hands. "You have your old men, like this one over here." "Speak for yourself," Alan interrupted. He poked Alan in the shoulder. "They're easy enough to spot. Same with your twinks and your butch lesbies." "Twinks?" Gil asked. "You're a twink, don't you know?" Clementine said. Gil looked up at Alan. He winked and whispered, "Young and small." Gil blushed. "Then you have your trannies and your crazies. Ain't nothing wrong with a tranny, but you gotta stay away from the ones with a little crazy. They'll get you like a nun at Sunday school." "Stop, you're scaring him," Alan laughed. "Here I've been going on this whole time. What about you, Gil?" "He's quite the music genius," Alan said. "He's been helping me at the station, but he won't tell me how he came to know so much." "Oh, I love a good secret," Clementine said. Then the music changed and a new performer entered the floor. "Look, it's Moody Mary," Clementine said. Alan leaned into Gil and told him, "She works at the local college in the theater program. Her costumes are always the most lavish and detailed. She makes them all by hand. Clem hates her." "Well, I think that's cheating," she said. From the bar, Gil couldn't see behind the bodies surrounding the performers. While Alan and Clementine talked about Mary Martina, who Gil later found out was named after a famous Broadway performer, Gil climbed on a bar stool and stood on his knees. He looked above the crowd. Her dress had all kinds of beaded patterns, each a different color, traveling up and down the evening gown and ending in a cluster of swirls and random spots. It fit her perfectly and looked much better than the Egyptian concoction Clementine was wearing. Gil looked around. There was a whole world he had never known right in this little bar, only a few miles from where he grew up, and he was one of them, waiting like a superhero for a radioactive spider or a teacher to show him his powers, to make him who he was going to be. Alan was that for Gil, and Gil would do anything to be one of them, to belong here in this bar. He drank it all in with his rum and diet and tried not to cough from the burn. Thanks.